Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. I'm Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is the live stream I do a couple of times weekly, where it's basically a Q&A with me. So if you have any questions to do with job search, any part of that, networking, job interviews, job interview questions, resumes, where to discover jobs, how to apply for them, how to negotiate salary, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. This is your big chance. Yeah, we are live. Special shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members, my Patreons, my super thanks donors. Those are always nice to get. And of course to you, my viewers and participants. Thank you for being here. This is episode number 145 of Honest HR Nitrous. And this is called How to Think Like a Hiring Manager. The key to getting hired. Because after all, if everybody knew exactly what was going on the other side of the table with the other person who's interviewing you at a job interview, then it would be easy. It wouldn't be much of a challenge. You know exactly what they're thinking, exactly what they need to hear, exactly what they're looking for. It wouldn't be that much of a challenge, right? So that's the deal. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But as always, if you are seeing my beautiful face, then you should see a chat box in the vicinity of my face, depending on what device you're watching this on. And if you've been a subscriber to my channel, get in the chat and let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with, and I will do my best to help you out. That's the idea. Okay, let's get down to it. So a lot of people don't understand the difference between a recruiter and a hiring manager. The recruiter is someone who works in HR. Their job is to find candidates. That's simply what their job is if they work in recruitment and selection. So posting jobs and filtering candidates and doing screening interviews and doing job interviews, all that kind of stuff, that's what they're trained in. And they go to school for this and they work in the HR department. That's the recruiter. The hiring manager is a different person. The hiring manager is not in the HR department most of the time. What they are is if you go to a job interview and you're talking to a hiring manager, if you get hired at that job, that person becomes your boss, right? So if you are a customer service rep going down for a job interview, talking to the head of the customer service department, that person's the hiring manager. And if you end up getting hired, you report to them. That's the idea. So that's what the hiring manager is. So in reality, they're usually a manager of some kind. Their title usually has the word manager in it. So customer service manager would be an example. Project manager, general manager, all that kind of stuff. So that's what it is. In job interviews, the thing is, you go down to a job interview, a lot of people that interview for jobs, a lot of candidates, they've never been on the other side of the table. So they don't understand what the other person might be looking for, what their mentality might be. I personally guarantee you that if ever you, you post a wanted ad for like a tutor or, some kind of small thing that, you might need, someone to help you with something. Like the classic example that I use on this channel is if you're moving furniture, you're moving from one apartment to another or something, and you need someone to help you move, you could post a job potentially and say, I need someone to help me move, and in that case, you would be in the role of a hiring manager, and then you would kind of get it. You would understand what is important to you and what's not important to you. And you'll see things like the most important thing, number one, is trust. This person's going to be handling your furniture, going to be handling all your personal stuff. The number one concern is not whether they know how to move something, it's whether you can trust them, right? They're not going to run off with your stuff and declare that it all fell off the back of a truck or something, right? Mill Mike says, hi, why some people think HR is enemy? Well, that's an excellent question, actually, because they kind of are sometimes. Because the idea is that what it is, it's a negotiation, right? And sometimes they are your ally, and sometimes they are your adversary. An example of where they are your adversary, for example, would be the salary issue, where you're wanting as much money as they could possibly pay, and they're wanting to get you for as little money as you'd possibly accept, right? So you have polar opposite incentives, right? So they're going to try and bargain you down, and you're going to try and bargain them up, right? So in that kind of situation, it's pretty clear they're your adversary. They're not on your side. They're working against you, right? Now, the hiring process is kind of a mix of that plus they're advocating for you. So they reach out to you. Maybe they call you in for an interview or something. They do this usually because they're wanting you to get hired, right? They're actually rooting for you. They're hoping that you're going to be the one, right? So if you are the one and you do have everything that they're looking for, they want you to be able to show that in the interview, right? So in that sense, they're your ally. But they're neither your ally nor your adversary. They're somewhere in between. And the problem is that let's imagine you're putting yourself up for a posted job. And posted jobs, especially these days, are known for having there's a lot of competition. They're very competitive. So usually they get like 800 applicants, okay? So already, you're competing really against all 799 other applicants to get the job, right? And the recruiter is not really on your side. They want to see you for who you are, and they want to see if you have what they're looking for, right? And what you want to do is you want to present yourself in the best possible light, right? And they don't want to see you at your best. They want to see you for who you really are, warts and all, right? So in that respect, they're not really on your side. Like, you're wanting two different things, right? So that's kind of what's going on there. Now, anyone who's been to a few job interviews, you probably have gotten what I would call the typical job interview experience, where you're forced to deal with a recruiter that, maybe, and I'm being kind here, maybe despite their best intentions, it's disorganized, it's confusing, they're not exactly polite all the time. They're not exactly experts at following protocol. So it doesn't feel warm and welcoming. It actually can feel disrespectful. It can, they can occasionally make cutting, rude comments that, chip away your self-esteem, things like this. There are some people that are good at being recruiters. There are a lot of people that are bad at being recruiters. And some people that frankly don't like their job, and it shows. And other people who, how can I put this? They've got little Hitler syndrome. They've got a little bit of power, and that power goes to their head, and they enjoy it. It makes them feel tall, knowing that they're the decider. They're the ones that can decide yes or no for different candidates. So they have candidates sort of coming to them on their knees practically, and they enjoy that. They revel in that. And unfortunately, this is the ugly side of that profession. And you don't have a lot of people calling them on that, on their bullshit. So that is a thing. Is that universal? No, but that is quite common. You do encounter that, So that's probably my answer to that, why some people would regard HR as the enemy. And the fact that they've got their own way of assessing people, which is different from how managers assess people. And, it's like, on the one hand, I understand what they're doing. I understand the logic. I've taught recruiters in university, but let's face it, it's not exactly accurate. You see, the purpose of recruitment and selection over the last 30, 40 years has been to get more efficient at what they do, right? So what that means is that they need to make a decision about you, whether you're the one or you're not, by putting less and less time in, right? That's been the thing that recruitment and selection has focused on in the last 40 years. How can we get more efficient at deciding who's a good employee or not, right? And so you already started off with a process where they were trying to get to know you without actually putting the time in to get to know you. So it's only kind of gotten worse in a sense. They ask a few superficial questions, and then they make a decision based on statistics, biases, assumptions, things like that, right? And if your career doesn't fit the mold, if you have like a non-standard career path, they're going to be making the wrong assumptions about you, more than likely. So that might be another reason why people might say that. But that's Mill Mike. Mill Mike gets the award for being the first person in the chat on Monday. So Sheenan Grief says, "Hi Bill, how was your Monday so far?" Pretty good. Pretty good. No complaints. Hopefully yours is pretty good. 5509 says, "What are the specific traits a hiring manager looks out for in a candidate?" Okay, excellent question. That brings us to our title that we're talking about. Now the thing is, like what I said kind of in the opening here, what the thing that nobody ever talks about is the elephant in the room, one of the biggest things, which is trust. Okay, I know that sounds kind of silly to talk about it. That's why most people don't. But it's true. By far, that's like the biggest thing. You're looking for someone that they trust. They're hoping that not everything that comes out of your mouth in a job interview is a lie, right? And they're hoping to be able to trust you with the work. Like, for example, let's say you've got someone who is, they've got a lot of education, a lot of experience, so they can do a job. But you hire them, and it turns out that even though they can do the job, what they ended up doing was, abusing the job. They did as little work as possible. They falsified their work. They got others to do their work for them. They blamed others for their failings. And lied about everything to the boss's face, right? Now, I think you would agree that if there was such a person, it doesn't matter how qualified they are, they're a bad employee. It's not a question of how qualified are you. The thing is, like, it's an instant sudden death fail if I can't trust you, right? So assuming that you can trust the person, then you look at like how qualified they are and things like that, right? But the most important thing that nobody mentions is trust, right? Why do you think they hire internal candidates whenever they can? Why do you think that's so popular? One of the reasons is because of this, because of trust. Because at the end of the day, they're hiring a stranger. So they don't want to hire a stranger for something really important, right? They're okay with posting jobs for like worker roles. Like workers, they're usually not trusted with the crown jewels. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's important that, you get a worker you can trust because they can do damage if they can't. But that's the number one thing. So that's kind of something that's like major. That's major. A lot of the reasons why recruiters are so skeptical about a lot of things, a lot of claims you make and stuff, is because of this. That's why they do background checks and things like this. And even with all of that, they know that it's imperfect. It's the reason they care about work gaps, right? When was the last time you were working? Because it says here, like, for the last year, you haven't had a job. Why would that be a problem? Well, it's because what they see is nobody's hiring you. Now, they know that they will never really know the answer for that. They can ask you and you can tell them the reason, but how do they know that's the real reason? They don't, and they realize this. So that's why work gaps are like our risk factor for them. It's because that trust thing, there could be something really wrong with you that makes nobody want to hire you. And they won't be able to figure out what it is until they hire you. And then they see for themselves, oh, it turns out you're a terrible worker or something. or you got a major attitude issue or something, right? So it's trust, right, is the number one thing in the background, right? That's why they don't hire CEOs off the street. You know, they need to know them or know of them first, right? You have to be checked out thoroughly before they hand the crown jewels over to you. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the most specific thing. So after that, okay, the next thing that they care about, and this is assuming that you're qualified. If you're at an interview, on paper, you're qualified, okay? Or else there'd be no point in bringing you in for an interview, right? So if they gave you an interview, that means that on paper, in their eyes, you are qualified to do the job, technically, right? The only question now is, what do you like as a person? And the hiring manager, you see, they are going to be working with you. If they pick you, they're going to be working with you pretty much every day from now on. So you better get along. You guys better get along. So likability is the number one thing that they care about after trust. Okay, like that's super important. Usually, nobody wants to admit this, but that's how they resolve tiebreakers. You know, you might be interviewing 6 people or something. You may eliminate 3 people because they said something wrong or whatever, but then you've got 3 people that, like, they're all pretty good, you know? You can't hire all 3, you can only hire 1. So how do you choose between them? It's whichever one the hiring manager likes the best. Right? I like that person. I think I can get along with them better than the other 2. You know, just a vibe. Pretty scientific, huh? But that's usually the tiebreaker. So likability is like huge. It perhaps shouldn't be, but it is. So that's what I would say. To what are the specific traits a hiring manager looks for in a candidate? Number 1, trust. Number 2, likability. And then number 3, maybe technical stuff. User says there are a lot of roles today where they look for someone that is self-reliant and got an entrepreneurial background. Traditional career path, not always a problem. Well, which is it? Are they looking for an entrepreneurial background or a traditional career path? Because those contradict. Those are opposites, right? Traditional career path is not entrepreneurship. And usually for worker jobs at large organizations and certainly medium-sized organizations, they are not looking for someone with an entrepreneurial background. They would love to get someone who has the skills of an entrepreneurial background. The problem is they don't hire people like that usually because they can't trust them. Because someone who's been an entrepreneur has shown that they're capable of doing their own thing themselves, right? And usually the only reason why that person would be now applying to a posted job to work in a big organization as an employee would be because their own stuff has failed, right? But they've demonstrated that they're the type of person that is going to do their own thing and wants to do their own thing and is capable of doing their own thing. That means they're a flight risk. That means that if you give them a job, all things being equal, you can expect them to try to do their own thing on the side. And if their own thing takes off, guess which one they're going to choose? They're going to quit this job and they're going to do their own thing full time, right? So as a result, recruiters in general don't like people with entrepreneurial backgrounds. It's idiotic, of course, because people with entrepreneurial backgrounds make sometimes the best employees. They have the most awareness of how things work and what's important and what isn't. You know, they make the best employees for that, precisely that reason. The problem is that the question is their loyalties. The trust thing is not there, right? So instead, they're looking for sheep. They're looking for people that have never done their own thing on the side. So the assumption is that if you get hired here, that'll be your job. That'll be your single source of income, and you will care about keeping this job and doing well in it. Because if you lose this job, it'll be a problem for you. So, you know, and that's what the organization wants. They want loyalty. They want to be able to call you, call you up at 11 p.m. at night and have you pick up the phone. They want to be able to call you in for a work shift and have you show up because you need this job and you can't lose it. Things like that, right? So that's usually how that stuff goes. Obviously, there are exceptions. Like, this thing about the real world is that there's always going to be exceptions to everything, right? But generally speaking, that's the rule. Does that make sense? So, coming back to the theme of the title of today's episode, talking about, what hiring managers want, right? Is they care about your ability to solve problems, your ability to deal with issues, things like that, generally speaking. So that's why hiring managers, they like behavioral questions. They like, tell me about a time when, you were doing this and this thing went wrong. What did you do? How did you resolve it? Right? Things like that. So if you can say, oh, it's no big deal. I mean, I did the standard thing. I went and I talked to this person. I made them aware that this is happening. And in the meantime, I worked in this way. So, I could still get some stuff done, even though this problem was there. And then when we got clearance to do whatever, I fixed the problem and I took care of it. Like that kind of stuff. They go, oh, okay. So you would probably be good, to have around. If stuff doesn't go exactly according to plan, you could still work. You could still do your job and, smooth things over. That's good. Gustavo says, it makes sense. I'm having an interview in 4 minutes and you are touching a very important theme. Thank you very much. Well, best of luck, Gustavo. Remember, go in there, be as friendly and as agreeable as possible. Excuse me. Be the person that they would want to work with, right? And that counts for a lot. Best of luck. I hope you get it, whatever it is. Vijay Garv says, good day, Mr. Bill. How are you doing? I'm doing fine. It's Monday. I'm here. The sun is out. It's swamping my cameras, so I've had to turn them right down. But apart from that, everything's peachy. Peachy keen, as they say. Or at least they used to say. Whenever I think they say something, it turns out it's an expression people stopped using 30 years ago or something. So I always got to put disclaimers. But yeah, what's your favorite job interview question? You guys love job interview questions? I used to get asked those all the time. Now I don't really get asked that anymore. Usually on live streams, people ask other things. They don't say, how would you answer? Tell me about yourself. They don't say stuff like that. Yeah. And by the way, anyone who starts a job interview by asking, tell me about yourself, they're not good at interviewing. I can tell you that much. It's like the most cliched way of starting a conversation. Like a job interview, it's like starting a conversation by saying, nice weather we're having for this time of year, don't you think? It's like, yes, technically you can start a conversation like that, but it's cliched and stupid as hell, So starting, a job interview by saying, so tell me about yourself, it's just like, oh my God, here we go. Hopefully you guys know the answer to tell me about yourself, right? I think it's the single most popular job interview question out there. Everybody keeps wondering, well, what do I say? Just remember, 3-step answer, okay? The first line you got to remember is, as you can see from my resume, right? That's the first thing you say. And then you go down your resume, you summarize it in 45 seconds. I got a comment from somebody saying, how do you summarize a resume in 45 seconds? Well, if you don't know that, I'm worried for you. Summarizing a resume in 45 seconds. Well, you say, so as you can see from my resume, I have a degree in this, whatever your education is. I got it, from this school. It's a degree in this. I then got a job here in this company doing this role for 5 years, 2 years, whatever. And then I moved to this company and worked in this role for 5 years, whatever it was, right? And I'm still working there right now. But I noticed you guys are, posting this job. So that's what brings me here today and why I'm excited to learn more about this opportunity. Right? You can easily summarize a resume in 45 seconds. Obviously, you're not going to say all the details. That's why it's a summary, right? So you end with that line. And that's what brings me here today and why I'm excited to learn more about this opportunity. And there's a lot going on there. It's a very strategic answer. First of all, never, ever, ever talk off the top of your head in a job interview. Because the problem is that you risk saying something that instantly eliminates you. Unbeknownst to you, they don't like X. They don't like that thing. And you just volunteered that you had it. So congratulations, you just eliminated yourself unwittingly, right? That happens all the time. And the thing is, there is an alternative. There is a way to make sure that you don't do that. And that is, think of your job application. You sent in a resume as part of your job application. And on the strength of your application, they gave you an interview, right? They said, we like your application. Come on down and do a job interview. So what conclusion can you derive? Well, clearly, nothing on your resume or in your entire job application got you eliminated. So there's no issues with any of that material. It's safe. So when in doubt in the interview, they ask you an extremely general question, like, tell me about yourself. You could say literally anything, and it would technically be an answer. If you stick to the stuff that's on your resume, you know that you're not putting your foot in your mouth and unwittingly eliminating yourself by saying something that seemed innocent to you, but it turns out they don't like that. That's not what they happen to be looking for, right? So that's what you do. The material on your resume is safe. So a good way to answer these general questions, especially the icebreaker question, when you don't really know anything about these people, you've just sat down, and this is the first question, right? It's also a good idea to stick to your resume, not just because it's a good sort of general introduction, but the idea is that in theory, these people would be prepared for the interview, right? They would have revised your resume and your application before the interview began. So when the interview starts and they meet you, they know who you are. They know what was on your resume, what was in your application. They know why they called you here, and they can start from there, right? Unfortunately, in the real world, as it turns out, most of the time, when you go to a job interview, unfortunately, they haven't had a chance to revise your resume before your interview started. Usually it's because job interviews are booked back to back. So there's precious little time between each interview. They might only have 2 minutes. So there's no time to revise anything in that amount of time. You're lucky if you have time to go to the bathroom, or get a drink of water or something. So usually interviews start and they don't remember who you are. They know they called you down, but they don't remember which application was yours. So when you answer the first question by giving a very compact summary of your resume, it's actually a good thing for them. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I remember you now. Right? So it serves that purpose too. Right? So that's the deal. So that's how I recommend answering, tell me about yourself. And one little footnote is that sometimes that first line that I recommend saying, so as you can see from my resume, some people feel uncomfortable saying that because depending on how you say it, it can come across as a little snotty, a little arrogant, like, oh, I would have expected you to read my resume, but clearly you haven't. So let me fill you in, a little bit arrogant. So you don't actually have to say that line. That line is more of a memory jog for you. So you remember, how to answer the question. I'm going to summarize my resume, right? Start with my education and then my experience, oldest to newest, right? It's more of a memory jog for you. As you can see from my resume, you say like, well, I have a degree in this and I have a degree in that and this education. And I've worked here in this role. I've worked there in this role. You might have time to tell them about one accomplishment or something stands out. And then you end with that closing line. And that's what brings me here today and why I'm excited to learn more about this opportunity. And the reason you do it like that is because you're not here at the interview to talk about what you did at some other job 10 years ago that has no bearing on anything, right? You're here to explain to them why you're the best person for this job, right? So you want to steer the conversation towards this job. So that's why you answer the way you do in the first question. It brings the topic up to this job. Let's talk about this job. What are you guys looking for? You know, and how can I speak to what you're looking for now, right? Let's forget about what I did 10 years ago at some other company. Let's talk about what you guys need now, right? So that's how I would answer that question. That's how I recommend it. It's a very strategic answer. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, best of luck, Gustavo. So Vijay Garv says, my favorite interview question is, do you have any questions for us? You may laugh, but I got to tell you something about that question. First of all, you know how tell me about yourself is usually like the first question? This question is usually the last question. Do you have any questions for us? And it's every bit as much a performance as every other question that they ask you. All the standard questions. This is every bit as much a performance. A lot of people let their guard down for this question. Big mistake. This is your last chance to make a good impression on them, right? Now think about it. If they said, do you have any questions for us? And you say, yeah, when do we eat? Think of what that's signaling about you, right? They say, do you have any questions for us? It's like, yeah, when do I get paid? Like when's the first time I get paid? What's that signaling about? It's signaling all kinds of things about you, what you say here, right? So don't let your guard down for this question just because it's like, sort of the ending question, right? That's usually where they get you. They get you with things that you're not expecting, right? Which is kind of ironic considering a lot of these questions are so cliched and like you expect each one of these, right? That kind of shows you who you're dealing with. But that's the deal. So you've got to ask some strategic questions and you think about what they signal about you, right? So like if you really want to get into it, I'll just say a little more about this question, okay? What I'd recommend, how to answer this, is you ask 3 questions usually, right? About 3 questions. And you got to think, what are they looking for in a candidate? Now, if they're looking for 3 basic things, if you ask 3 questions, wouldn't it be ideal if you could signal that you have each of those 3 things with the 3 questions you ask, right? Wouldn't that be great? So for example, one of the things they're looking for is someone who is technically qualified to do the job. Doing this job is not going to really be a problem for you. You know what I mean? So if you could ask a question that kind of signals that, you got this. This job is not going to be a technical challenge for you, right? That would be really good. What else are they looking for? They're looking for someone who's going to come in and not rock the boat. They're going to be able to interoperate well with everybody else. They're not going to piss everyone off. They're not going to have communication issues or attitude issues or anything like that, right? So they're looking for someone who cares about coming in and not being disruptive, getting along with everybody, making everything flow smoothly, right? So imagine if you could ask another question that signaled that you're tuned into that. You could ask a question like, how do people, in this department or in this place, resolve conflict? How do they normally communicate? How do they normally communicate in such a way that minimizes conflict or something like that? That shows that, you're tuned into that. You're thinking about that, right? So think about that kind of stuff. Like, what are you going to signal by your questions? And because that's the last thing in the job interview, usually, that's the impression they're going to be left with. So this is your last chance to sort of communicate to them that, hey, I've got those 3 things you're looking for, right? Let me show you. Let me signal and demonstrate to you that I'm the person you're looking for. So don't knock it. That question, a lot of people they don't put a lot of thought into it. I would recommend that you think about that one a little bit harder. Gustavo says, thank you very much, Bill and everyone. I saw your video about tell me about yourself. 1, academic, 2, work experience, and other experiences that relate to the work. Yes, and you summarize it in 45 seconds. You do not want to be spending 10 minutes on the icebreaker question, right? That's the other part of this. You don't want it to take up half the interview, talking about what you did with other people. That's the other part. You want to give them a nice, polite answer, something that's informative, sets up the conversation, but then you get off this question quick and you get to the real reason why you're here, which is like, what are you looking for? And let me show you that I have that. Vijay Garv says, how does one take better interviews? All my interviews have started with, tell me about yourself. Maybe if I ever take an interview for whatever reason, I can be ready. Okay, I don't fully understand. Well, yeah, you have no control over what they ask you. All I'm saying is that, if you go to an interview and they actually literally ask you, tell me about yourself. It's like, it just signals someone who's not particularly good at interviewing. That's all. You have no choice what they ask you. You just can only respond to it, right? So I wouldn't worry about it too much. When they do, for example, when they do management interviews for management positions, it works completely different. First of all, recruiters aren't allowed to contribute to the decision-making process. They're usually reduced to essentially clerks. They deal with the grunt work, but it's managers, like hiring managers, that call the shots on those exclusively. And the way they usually do it is you have a lot of free-form conversations. You go down there, you meet the hiring manager, and you have like an unstructured conversation. It's not like they've got a list of questions written down. So, where do you see yourself in 5 years? It's like they don't do stuff like that you have a organic conversation, right? So it's a little bit of a different thing, right? Sheen and Grief says, I once had this question, what do you like more, A or B? I said yes. Oh, I got blue. Yeah. The answer could either be A, Abraham Lincoln, B, yes, C, blue, or D, sodium pentothal. Or E, all of the above. That's what I would pick. That just shows you, and that's going to give them insight into whether you're the right candidate. You see how much smarter they are than the rest of us. They can think at this high level, man. Did you realize you were in the presence of these towering intellectual giants when you went there? Vijay Garv says, your questions to ask at the end of the interview video was very useful. Okay, good. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of questions you could choose from. Usually first-time job candidates, they're wondering what could I even say there? So that's kind of the first level, like have something intelligent to say. Then, if you're a bit more seasoned, experienced, a bit more professional at a higher level, then you might want to consider doing what we were talking about a moment ago, which is strategically picking questions that signal certain things. That's more of a second order kind of thing, like a higher level thinking about it. So, it depends what level you're at. I get a lot of people that are kind of just, beginners, people just out of high school and stuff, and they're getting their first job, and, they don't need to analyze everything to level 9. They just need something that just not freezing and going, and then being silent, would be an improvement. You know what I'm saying? So, Gustavo says, what happens when you get called by a company, but you did not apply to them? There is no job posting, just a call. Well, what happens? Well, it depends on what they say, right? If they're calling you and they're saying, we found your resume online, and we think that you may be a good candidate for this. We have an opening, and we haven't posted it, but we're actually looking for people that might be a good fit, and we think you might be one of those people. Can I get you to send us a resume and whatever, right? I mean, I've had that stuff, like in the 90s and stuff. I got a job where someone did that to me. I had put my resume online, like I think it was like monster.com or something like that, like back in the day, Monster, I think. Because I had applied for jobs or whatever online. This was when like applying for jobs on the internet was new, right? It was like brand new. And so I didn't apply for this company's job, but they saw my resume, because I guess these resumes are public or whatever, and they contacted me on the strength of that. I ended up actually getting the job. So yeah, it happens. At least it has happened to me once. But usually when you do networking type stuff, I mean, that's how things go, right? You're going to be doing direct outreach, which is extremely powerful. Everyone should be doing that. That's by far the most powerful way to get a job. That's where you find the employers around you that have potential to hire you, because they hire people with your qualifications. That people like you work at their company or whatever. So they're close by. You could certainly commute to work there. They're like 5 minutes away or 10 minutes away or whatever. You find those places, and then you reach out to the hiring managers there, right? That's called direct outreach. And you can do all of this online. I talk about this on a regular basis. I'll spare you guys the big spiel, but so if you're doing that type activity, you're going to get people that call you up and say, hey, I received this thing about you, or I saw this thing, I saw your resume, we might have something. Are you interested in pursuing it? That kind of thing. Or they'll call you down to say, can you come down and talk for half an hour? Can you just meet me in my office, or, meet me nearby? A great place to suggest for people, if you want to do like informational interviews and stuff, is the nearest coffee shop to them, right? Now, if they won't even go a couple blocks away to a coffee shop to meet you, that signals something. But if they say, sure, yeah, let's do this, that's usually a sign that they're open-minded, that there's honestly a need. So it's something that you definitely would want to consider. Sheen and Grief says, this keeps jumping on me. Sheen and Grief says, what is your take on asking them, understanding the context of this role helps me see where I could contribute. May I ask why the position became available? I don't think there's any real obvious reason why you wouldn't ask that, but at the same time, it kind of doesn't matter, Like the thing is, yes, there's a lot of stuff you'd like to know. You'd like to get the dirt on these people. If they treated somebody like crap and that person quit, and that's why the position is vacant, you would want to know that. Okay? I think we all agree on this, right? However, you don't necessarily lead with those type of probing questions, right? Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to get them to be interested in you. You want them to have a good feeling about you. We want to say, this person has potential. I kind of like them. Let's bring them in and talk to them, right? That's what you're going for, right? So the idea is, if you in your first contact with them, you decide to put the screws to them. You say I want to know why this is available. Did you drive someone away? Did the person quit? And then when they address that, you go, okay, well, I'm only interested in positions that pay more than this. So you better pay more than this, or we got nothing to talk about. You know what I mean? okay, these are things that you do want to know and you do want to address with them. But doing it like in your first contact is not the place and time to do it. You understand what I'm saying? What you want to do is you want them to like you, to think, this is the person we need to go with. I think they're going to be the one. You want them to proceed like that and keep that good feeling with you right until they offer you a job. Right? Because at that point, in several ways, they're committed. Right? They've picked you. They've said, okay, we've all discussed it, all the decision makers, and we've all agreed this is the person to go with, right? So they're all resigned to that, right? They're all feeling really good about you at that moment too. They want you to be the one. Now, if you turn around and say, yeah, this is fine, that's fine, but I'm going to need this, then there's a high likelihood they will actually give you that because they've committed to this. And if you say no and throw it back in their face, then that means this process has to go on for them. And they don't want that. They want to get on with things, right? So what you do is you wait until they're interested and they've picked you. Then you can maybe get answers for some of these things if they're a really big deal. Or what you can do, what I'd recommend, is get the job in your hand first. Ask for whatever you need at that moment. Say they give it to you. Say, okay, fine, we can give you that. So great, you got the offer, signed. They want to work with you. Now you can ask the questions, right? And now there's a reason why they would want to answer because you're going to be working with them, right? You're not just some candidate asking questions that they don't have to answer. You're like the new person in this role. They're going to be working with you. So there's more pressure for them to answer. They can't just weasel out of it by refusing to answer. So it's the order of things that matters, right? So I agree that that's something you do want to know. I disagree that that's something you should bring up proactively in the job interview process. If it ends up being a deal breaker, then what does it all matter? At least this way, you actually had, a chance to have an offer in your hand, and then you can decide for yourself, is it worth, say you found out that person did get fired, or they drove them away because, they were too demanding or something. Now you at least can decide, I've got this job offer in my hand. It pays this much. They've already committed to it. It's all signed. Should I take it, or is this too much of a red flag? Right? So I would recommend doing things in that order, you do the sales process, you make them want to work with you, and then you address concerns after. If they don't pick you, what does any of this matter? It's all moot, you know what I mean? But there's a higher likelihood they're not going to work with you if you put the screws to them as soon as you start talking to them. That's what I would say. Vijay Garv says, yeah, that answered it for me. I wanted to know how to not make it cliche if I take someone's interview in the future. You mean you want to do an interview and you don't want to have to ask, tell me about yourself? If that's the case, here's what you do. Don't worry about a script, okay? Don't worry about interview questions. Bring the person down and talk to them and say, so, how's it going? What brings you here? Or what are you looking for? I've read your resume and I understand that, you're, you've got a background in customer service. You've worked in a couple of places. What do you think of customer service? What are you looking for? Have you seen different ways of doing it? Or something like that. And then they'll start talking, right? And then when they start talking and they say something semi-interesting, you go, oh, really? Why? Or why is that? Or why do you think that? Or where does that come from? And then you just have this organic, meandering conversation over the process of which you learn who they are. You'll learn pretty quick the type of person they are. When you ask them about stuff on their resume, I see you worked here. What was that like? What did you end up doing there? And it's a very organic conversation. And you go into did you like this type of activity in that role, or were you more into that kind of activity? Or did you have a preference? And if they say, oh, no, I was more into the paperwork side of customer service or something, like warranty claims and things like this. And you go, oh, that's interesting. Do you work with a lot of people that were into warranty also? I would have thought that most people would be more into talking to the customers. And you go, no, I've dealt with some weird customers, some very demanding, obnoxious customers. I actually like the warranty stuff because it's not straightforward. But I've learned all the rules of how you do warranty over the years, and that gives me an edge. People actually come to me with questions about the warranty process and blah, blah, blah. And then you get to know that person, right? So that's what I'd recommend. That's how you have these. That's what they do on the management side, right? You start off with the person's resume, like, oh, I see you've done this. And then you go into how they found it, why they did it, what opinions they formed, what's their philosophy behind doing that, things like this. And then you see if you can explain their whole career and the type of person they are. That takes a bit of time. You might have to talk to them for an hour and a half to really go through everything. But that's so much more effective than saying, tell me about yourself. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? You know what I mean? Those are the most canned, artificial interactions you can get. Okay, where are we here? I wanted to know if it make it cliche. Okay, I'm leaving. Thank you very much. Okay, right. Best of luck, Gustavo. We got a super chat from my close personal friend, Bobby. Bobby sent a super chat. Says, do you think there is always a possibility to reopen a place that has been closed down, like the YMCA that I'm working at is closing on the 31st of the month? I would be working on getting the money from other jobs to reopen. First of all, thank you for the super chat. I do appreciate that. Now, are you talking in the context of like you're running the place or you're working there as an employee? And you're asking like, what's the likelihood that they might shut down but then reopen? I actually need you to clarify that. I can start talking about the first one if you want. Do you think there's always a possibility to reopen a place? There's always a possibility, yes, that's been closed down. Like the YMCA I'm working at is closing, and I'll be working on getting the money from other jobs to reopen. So, yeah, it's possible. I mean, yes, it depends what they're doing. When they say closing the place down, what does that actually mean legally? Like, are they insolvent? Are they going bankrupt and dissolving the company? Or are they simply laying off some of the people? Or are they closing down operations? Is this I don't know much about the YMCA. Are they all franchises or they're branches of like a central office? Because, if one branch closes, but there's others operating, maybe you can get transferred to another branch. Like I'm not sure. It depends on the structure. But if you're owning it and you're running it, that's a different thing altogether. So if you could tell me like what context specifically, I'll be happy to go into more detail depending on what you say. Okay, so I'll just put that on pause until I get a response from that. Code says, hi, sir. Good evening. How are you? I am new here. Well, welcome. Yeah, you can ask me anything about, hiring, careers, that kind of stuff, networking. You're welcome to Sheen and Grief. Femi Williams, I remember you. It's been a while. Hi, Bill. If someone's been out of work for nearly a year and receives a job offer after an interview, would you still recommend negotiating the salary? Well, that's entirely up to you. Like, listen, here's what's going on, okay? Anytime you negotiate, it adds risk because there's always a chance that they could say no, and then they rescind their offer. Does that happen most of the time? No. but it can happen. So if you only have two options, unemployment or this job, and unemployment is no longer an option for you, you must have this job. That's your only alternative. I would take it. I wouldn't play hardball. I wouldn't try and negotiate. I would just take it if that's what's more important to you. If, however, you have other options, you have other things lined up or other job offers or whatever, or you're doing an entrepreneurial type thing on the side, or, whatever, like you've got other options, or you're not desperate, unemployment is still a valid option for the moment, then, it might make sense for you to endure a slight risk and push for something a little bit more, right? So that's kind of the situation before you, and you can decide what is to your liking, right? But that's kind of how it works. I mean, you can do both. It depends what's more prudent in your situation. Julian says, hi, is it a good idea to make a joke or two during the interview when answering the recruiter's questions? That depends on the feel of it for you. Like, if you've got a rapport going and, you're kind of laughing and they're laughing and, there's clearly a good vibe and a rapport, making a tasteful joke is not a problem usually. But the problem is there's risk associated with it. If there's any doubt that it might not go over well, don't do it. That's what I'd recommend. It's not expected of you that you would crack jokes and stuff during a job interview. Now, what is expected of you is being agreeable and friendly. So if you've got a great sort of vibe going and, everybody's kind of happy and enjoying the interaction, that's good. That's good. If you think that you can enhance it with the joke, that's up to you. There's nothing wrong with it if you can pull it off, but just beware that humor, as I'm sure you know, is subjective and different people have different senses of humor, right? So it's a little bit risky, and what you do with the risk is it could backfire and you could lose the job, or you could really endear yourself. So it's up to you if you want to go for it. But yes, it's something within the realm of reason. I'm not going to sit here and tell you no, don't make jokes. It's no, you gotta. If you are a people person and you can read people well, I'd say go for it if you think it's a good idea and the stakes aren't too high. Julian says, not as a deflection, but just to make things more lively. I've watched quite a few videos about interviews, but that topic never came up except as don't deflect. Yeah, I agree. People don't address it because it's not really expected to be a part of it. But for example, I think the last job I got, as an employer, as an employee that I got, not a manager, but a worker. If I remember correctly, I did I think 2 or 3, I can't remember. Anyway, the last interview I remember because they took me on a tour of the place and we were in the lunchroom and they introduced some of the other employees and stuff to me and we were all talking together. And, we're sitting in or we're standing by this kind of kitchenette in the lunchroom. And I can't remember who said what, but I cracked a joke. Somebody said something and I kind of made a little humorous quip or whatever. And it went over well. Everybody laughed, and then they ended up hiring me. They didn't hire me because of the joke, but the point is that I had a rapport with these people. They clicked with me, and I clicked with them. And so in that situation, that's something I did, and it worked. But I've been to many other interviews also where we didn't have that lively, friendly vibe going. It was much more, businesslike and kind of uptight and, tight collar, stuffed shirt kind of thing. And sometimes it was just nasty. I did not feel like joking in those situations. And if I had, it would have probably gone over like a lead balloon, and that might have been the kiss of death or something. I mean, I didn't get those jobs anyway, so you know what I mean? It's about the rapport. It's a people thing, you know? Mel says, "Hi, Bill. Camera interviews are awkward. I don't know where to look. I do try to look at the small camera. Do I look awkward to the interviewer too?" Well, tell me, Mel, how awkward do I look right now? I'm not looking at the camera. I'm looking off to the side where I have this feed. And the other thing is that I normally wear glasses. Like I'm what do you call it? Like short-sighted. Like I can only see things close up. So I have to kind of do this, you know? So I'm looking at the camera right now, but normally I'm looking down at a video feed of me talking. That's like where my eyes naturally gravitate to. So I'm not looking at the camera. Is that an issue? I don't think so. I think it's a very common thing for people to do on the internet. Ideally, you'd like to be looking into the camera the whole time. I just have my camera very high, so it's kind of a little bit uncomfortable to be looking up like this all the time. It looks much more natural, I think, when I'm looking like this. But I don't think it matters that much unless they've given you specific instructions. Do I look awkward to the interviewer too, where I should focus when I'm answering questions? I don't think so. You see, I look off to the side. I do on every second Wednesday, I do live streams on this channel where I have another YouTuber, me and her do a live stream together. And, you know, I spent the entire time looking down at my screen instead of at the camera. I don't think anyone really cares, or if they do care, it hasn't had much of an impact. If you feel a lot more comfortable, I would say do it. But if you can train yourself to like be comfortable staring into the lens of the camera, then you know, that might be a good thing. It might be just a simple matter of training yourself to do it over, you know, maybe a couple of hours, and that's all it takes. Abracadabra says, "Hi, Bill. I applied to a senior role, and I've been in the role for 6 years. A recruiter asked to apply for a lower level. Both requirements were identical." Okay, so hold on. I applied to a senior role. I've been in the role. The recruiter asked to apply for a lower level. Both requirements were identical. I applied and interviewed it. How not to get low balled. You don't have any control over what they offer you, by the way. You know, you don't. I mean, they can offer you whatever the hell they damn well please. They have free will. But you also have free will. You don't have to take anything that doesn't make any sense for you. You know what I mean? So you can put in for it and just say at the time, like, look, I think that the senior role might be more appropriate for my skill set, but I do understand if there's maybe a probationary period where you might want me in a junior role just until I learn the company culture and, you know, the way around, and I get over the learning curve, you know. But then I think that the senior role is more a match to my skill set, you know, or something like that. You might want to say that initially, and then they can do whatever the hell they want, and then you just decide if they do offer you something, you can decide whether it makes sense for you to take. Or if they offer you something and it's for the junior one, you could say, okay, well, I want you to write in that, you know, after 6 months, I'm going to be in the senior position. You know, that's because this is actually, I'm taking a step down here. Now, I don't really feel I need to take a step down. You know, I would be interested in moving sideways, but I'm not going to go down for no reason, you know, or something like that. You can demand whatever you want, you know, when you get to that point. Okay, so just know what makes sense for you and understand what you're going to do depending on what they come back to you with. Okay? I mean, they can try and lowball you, and just the answer is no. Or the answer is, I'll get back to you. Meaning, of course, I don't get back to you, which means no. You know? They can try and lowball you, but if it doesn't make sense for you to take it, then, yeah. Femi Williams says, thanks, good advice. I'd rather not take the risk of negotiating salary for now if I do receive a job offer. Yeah, you know, there's no harm in doing that. It's a matter of risk management. There are no guarantees with this kind of thing. A Recreator says, "Are you stupid?" If you're talking to me, the answer is no. Question to you is, do you know how to spell a sentence or throw a sentence together? Okay, we got ourselves a troublemaker in here, so let's take care of that. You know, a lot of YouTubers that do like bigger streams and stuff, what they do is they have moderators that do that kind of stuff. And I have some moderators for comments, but not for live streams. So if you just bear with me a second here. There we go. Awesome. Okay, perfect. Right. Okay, let's see here. Where were we? Okay, Mel says, also, after asking my questions about the job and their expectations, there's an awkward silence. After asking my questions about the job and their expectations, there's... Now, Mel says this was the camera thing. Okay. Of the job and their expectations on awkward silence. Is this when I should put in how I will work to fill those expectations or how to plan if hired? Okay, so here's the deal. A couple of things going on. You know, when they ask you that question, you know, do you have any questions for us, right? And then you ask. They don't want to be put on the spot. Nobody wants to be put on the spot. You see, what you're actually trying to do is you're doing the sales process. You're trying to sell yourself. You're trying to convince them that they should forget all about the other candidates and hire you, right? That's what this is all about. So making them feel awkward by asking them a question that they can't answer or they don't want to answer, you know, or their hands are tied, they can't say certain things, doesn't make them feel good, right? So accept that. That's the situation you're in. You can say like, okay, how many people has your company exploited this year? You know, or something like that, like a very hostile question. You know, they can't like respond freely to that. They can't say screw you, or they can't say I don't have that information. Oh, about 6, you know, so far this year. You know what I mean? So just accept that, okay? It's not a free-for-all. They're not going to like start revealing the dirt about their organization or about themselves freely, you know, unless they're like especially stupid. They're not going to do that. So, you know, when you ask questions, you can't like get the dirt on them because it won't work, okay? They're just not going to answer. And the only other thing that's going to accomplish is they're going to start feeling weird about you. So they're probably not going to move you forward in this process, right? So that's how you need to regard those, okay? It's not like a free, open forum to get all the information that you'd love to know, right? And it will do a lot of damage if you try, okay? And if they don't, the other thing is that a lot of recruiters, like, just understand, I started off this live stream talking about recruiters, and recruiters, they work in the HR department. They have the job of posting jobs and doing basic filtering of candidates when they themselves have never been in the job in question. So they could be posting a job for an accountant, right? And a bunch of accountants apply for this job. And the recruiter now has to filter those applicants and say, this person, you know, is good, this person is not good. When the recruiter themselves, they don't know the first thing about accounting, right? It's a stupid situation, but that's the way it is. Usually, recruiters will make the call on things that don't require subject matter expertise, right? They're making the call based on your demands or your situation or your work history or how you're communicating with them, things like this, stuff they can see, right? But my point is that if you go down to an interview and you're talking to a recruiter and you've got a very specific question about like the nature of the role and what duties you'll be, how you do certain duties or, whatever it is, the recruiter may not know the answer to that because they're, in this case, they're not an accountant. You go down and say, are you going to be using this type of accounting or this type? They may not know. So it might be awkward for them. That's the other thing that's going on here. So hopefully that makes sense, Mel says. Standard says, I just finished a final interview presentation today. Can I ask what signs the interviewer, he's a chief technical officer, gives that I indicate I passed it? I don't know. That's unanswerable. That depends on the person. I don't think someone who's competent probably wouldn't give any signs. Is kind of the default thing to do. You're not going to say, congratulations, you passed the interview. It looks like we're going to offer you the job. That's the kind of things they don't want to say, because often they'll have to go away and discuss it with people, including the recruiter. And the recruiter could say like, well, I know you said you're probably going to hire them, but just so you know, I did a background check on them. It turns out they falsified half their resume, so we can't hire them. You know what I mean? And then it's like a sticky situation where the CTO made representations about what they're going to do, and then they didn't do it. So right? So they're not going to indicate that stuff either way. Or you never know. They might say, congratulations, my boy. Whether you're a man or a woman, they might say, congratulations, my boy, we're welcome aboard, You're welcome to Julian. 6808 says, know your audience. True, but that's not always possible, right? Especially if you're called to a job interview, you sit down, you have no idea who you're talking to, because they haven't told you, It's good advice to try and figure out who you're talking to. My camera advice. Somebody's giving camera advice to the person that was looking for it. Randolph says, short, sweet, and to the point response to the troublemaker. Yeah. I guess stupid was the most derogatory word he knew, so I guess he just said it over and over again. And hopefully that gave him pleasure, him or her, or it/that. Mel says, that explains a lot. Thank you. ChatGPT said to ask such questions to show you're interested. But after the awkward silences, I started to regret asking those questions. Yeah, well, ChatGPT is an incredibly useful tool, but it's not right all the time. That's the thing. What you can do is, if you want, you can go back to ChatGPT and you can say, are you sure about that? Some things I've done with it, it's like it gives you all this advice in this very confident kind of voice. And then you say, are you sure about that? And it goes, actually, you raised a good point. I was wrong on that last output. And in fact, you should do the opposite of what I said. So, you can probe and say like, well, why do you say that? It seems kind of fishy. It seems like you might encounter this issue. And then it has a chance to address that. And sometimes it reverses itself. It's that kind of quality, right, that we're getting used to. Julien says, yeah, I'd be careful trusting ChatGPT for human interactions. Yeah, well, as I said, it's a useful tool. It depends what level you're at, and it depends what you're trying to do. But also, it does help if you know ChatGPT. It's been around for a while. It's changed a bit over the years, but you can go deep with it. You can get it to explain why, and you can call it. you say like, it says to you, okay, when you're in a job interview, always ask questions to indicate that you're interested. And you say, okay, what questions? And then it gives you some examples. And you could say to it, well, just to play devil's advocate, I mean, doesn't that sound like you're getting on their case? What if the recruiter doesn't know those technical details? Or what if they just don't want to answer? Or what if that's like, taking the whole interview on this like tangent somewhere that has nothing to do with getting you hired? Now you're just talking about technical details of a software system. I mean, who cares? Is that really the best use of time? And see what it says. Because sometimes it'll say you're absolutely right. Maybe you shouldn't do that after all. Other times it says, it sticks to its guns and it says, actually, despite that, it's still something you should do for this reason. And I say that because a lot of people do this and they encounter this, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, it sticks to its guns and it backs it up. And it's like, okay, so that gives you some further insight. So anything that it tells you that's kind of fishy, where you're going, really? Call it on it. Like, call it out and say, like, I don't know about that. Wouldn't that have this effect? I think it's going to have this effect, and just see what it says. See if it can persuade you. You don't have to just accept whatever it says. Mel says, I did the same thing in my second interview and he answered it fine, but then we had an awkward silence. Yeah. The reality is that, like, all this stuff about, like, the interview is two-sided, like, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing, that's crap. Like, listen, you've got free will, and at the end of the day, whatever they offer, if they offer anything, you decide whether it makes sense for you to take it. It's just that simple, right? You're in control of yourself. You don't have to do anything that, you don't want to do, right? But let's face it, the interview, especially if it's for a posted job, it's for them. They're talking to 800 people. 800 people applied for the job. You know what I mean? It's like, if they don't have the patience to answer your questions, they're just going to reject you and go with someone else. You know what I mean? So, like, they're calling the shots. You may see it differently in your own mind, but the reality is that 800 people are applying for the job, and you're one of them. It's not like you've got 800 companies knocking on your door saying, we think you'd be great for a job with us, right? That's not what's happening. You're one of the people going to them. So they're interviewing you. You're not interviewing them. You know what I mean? You give them what they need that's going to give you the best chance of them selecting you, and then you make a call, whether it makes sense for you or not. And if it doesn't, you say no. You say, sorry. Either no outright or no, I would need this. And until you can give me this, sorry. Best of luck. Laker says, hello, I just joined in hopes of getting tips of the final panel interview that I have. Okay, we could talk about panel interviews. I mean, I've talked about that before quite a bit. It's the same as just a regular interview. The only difference is that the questions come from different people, So the added complication is that you've got more than one person in front of you. The only real thing that helps there that I've found is, like, I have a chest pocket here. I put in business cards. Go get yourself some business cards. It costs like literally $20 US to get yourself a stack of business cards. If you're wondering what to put on them, if you have a LinkedIn profile, like the header of your LinkedIn profile, that's the information you put on a business card. Your name, your tagline, maybe the same photo you have on LinkedIn if you have your profile photo. If you don't, I recommend you take one with a cell phone, just like a head and shoulders shot, you looking friendly, and your contact information, right? And then just put that on a business card. Now, you go down to like a panel interview. The obvious thing is you take out your card. There's 4 people in for you. Take out your card here. Here's my card. That's cue for them to start passing you their business cards. So what you do is you get 4 cards from 4 people. You put them down on the table in front of you, like in, this person's card is in front. That person's card is in front, that person's card. So like, this is John, they're the owner of the company. This is Jerry, they're the hiring manager. And this is Edna, she's the director of HR, whatever. Right? So their names, their roles, you have an idea who you're speaking to. If you can get this information ahead of time, you talk to your contact, the recruiter or whatever, and say, who will be at the interview? Do you know who will be there? And then if they tell you, you look up these people on LinkedIn, like, they're an accountant, they're an engineer, they're a lawyer, or whatever. So like, okay, now I got an idea who I'm talking to. And then in every other respect, it's the same as a regular interview. Same questions, same answers, everything else is the same. So that's what I'd say for a panel interview. Okay, Bobby, my good friend Bobby is back with another super chat. Thank you, Bobby. You don't have to do that. I got the first one and I appreciate it. You can ask whatever you want, and I will answer whatever questions you have. So you don't have to super chat each time, just so you know. Just so I know. Now, YMCA is a branch company. I'm an employee, okay, at the Randsburg YMCA as a janitor for 8 years. It's shutting down because of funding issues. Okay, so there may be an opportunity to transfer to another branch, right? I'm not sure if you've made those inquiries already. But if you haven't, obviously do them as quickly as you can. Now, look, anything's possible, but usually when things shut down, they're not in a situation where they can immediately reopen. So unfortunately, the reality is that it's probably going to be shut down for a while, if not forever. You know what I mean? I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but that's the likelihood. Now, it is still possible for it to reopen. It's possible for anything to happen. What I would recommend you do if you have the opportunity is go talk to the person in charge of this branch and just ask them these questions and say, like, is the shutdown temporary or is it permanent? Do we know? And then is there a possibility of transfer to another branch? Right? And if there is, even if you don't know if it's possible or not, would you be able to make the attempt? Would you be able to call up a couple of the branches and just ask them if they are looking for a good full-time janitor and see what they say? If you could do that on my behalf, I would appreciate it. Something like that. Like, these are things you can do. Right? Now I'm going to go back to your original thing here. Okay, it's been working. It's closed down on the 31st. Would be working on getting the money from other jobs to reopen. Yeah, and usually, not always, but usually something like a multi-employee branch, it would need the kind of money that's beyond one person's income. So even if you were to hypothetically give your whole income to the YMCA to see if they could reopen, I don't think that's going to work, unfortunately. The other thing is that the income would have to come ultimately from customers, or else, like, okay, they make it through this month, but then, it has to come from somewhere after that. So yeah, I would look at transfer. And if not, here's what I'd recommend. Go and see if the manager will write you a letter of recommendation. Okay? Then ask them if you could use them as a reference. Okay? And then if there are any other employees there, like you have coworkers and stuff, while you're there before the 31st, ask them the same thing. Say, would it be okay if I were to use you as a reference? And then let them say yes. And if they say yes, then get their contact information, like phone number, email address, and just clarify what their title is and what their full name is, So before you leave, you have all of that, and that can help you get something else, if it comes to that. Okay, so letter of recommendation from the manager, reference from the manager. Say, is it okay if I use you as a reference? And then same with coworkers, okay? And then the other item was to see if the manager would contact other branches on your behalf just to see if they could use a janitor, they're looking for a janitor, or someone, or maybe you have other capabilities too that, they might have a need for someone that's something related to a janitor or any kind of role you could fill, right? And if this person will be a reference. So those are things you can do before the end. So I'd recommend that you seriously consider doing those before the 31st. The sooner the better. And best of luck to you, my friend. Whichever way this goes, remember, you're going to be on your feet. You're going to land on your feet. These things are temporary. You're going to be okay. Randolph says, Mel says, no. Okay, talking to Mel says, Amaze says, that's right. ChatGPT can occasionally slip and then correct itself after a prompt. That's why it's helpful to recognize when a response seems accurate. Absolutely. Speaking of, Julian, so speaking of ChatGPT, something I'd like to ask for multiple AIs to give feedback on each other. Yeah, sure. Get them to talk to each other too while they're at it. Mel says, where is that? Mel says, LOL, I've done 2. And it says what you said, but then it gives me an explanation as to why I'll end up working in my favor. Then it will give me another set of questions or a different way to ask. Yeah, it's not super consistent. That's the thing. Julian, but even then for my CV, one AI was very happy about it and I wanted to change everything. Yes, so it's going to go back and forth. Mel says, I've acknowledged their answer, but then we just look at each other and I don't know what else to say after. Do I end it? I always wait for them to end the interview, but I do understand better now. Yeah, it's probably a good idea to wait for them to do it. You're not wrong. Even if it kind of feels awkward. It's not like they're writing something down. Like that's what the silence is, right? It's not like they're like making notes. Because sometimes they do that, right? They're recording your response, right? Depending on what type of interview it is. People are talking to other people. Okay, excellent. Well, thanks to everybody who participated today. I'm going to be back in about half an hour. In half an hour, I've got another live stream, one on entrepreneurship. So if you're interested in entrepreneurship, stick around for that. In the meantime, thanks to everybody who participated. And thanks to Bobby for the super chats. Best of luck, Bobby. Bobby's going to be just fine. Times like these are never easy, but it's going to be okay. You're going to land on your feet and everything's going to be fine. Just wait and see. In the meantime, you got a couple of things to do. I will be back in half an hour with entrepreneurship. I will be back on Wednesday with another edition of Honest HR Nitrous, or another, actually it's not Honest HR Nitrous, it's another edition of a different live stream, but same idea, answering questions about job search. And then on Wednesday, I have an interesting live stream going on. I got a special guest where we're going to talk about the business of Hollywood, Hollywood's financial engineering and some of the behaviors it locks them into. So I'm very interested for that. So stick around for that on Wednesday. You guys are awesome. Never forget that. Never let the job search process convince you otherwise. Take care, and I'll see you soon.